Maya Santos, a rising Filipina interior designer in Dubai, thought she had landed the project of a lifetime when billionaire Sheikh Omar Al-Mansoor chose her to redesign his lavish villa, until his admiration turned into a dangerous obsession that would cost her everything. Maya Santos had always been known for her eye for detail. Born and raised in Manila, she grew up sketching furniture on the backs of school notebooks and rearranging the family's modest home every few months just to give it a fresh look. Her passion for design carried her through university and into a growing career in the Philippines, but she wanted more. Dubai, with its towering skyscrapers and endless appetite for luxury, seemed like the perfect place to make her mark. It was a city where the rich sought beauty in every corner of their lives, and Maya believed she could bring something new to the table. When she landed her first contract, a mid-sized apartment redesign, she threw herself into the project completely. Within weeks, word spread about her ability to transform ordinary spaces into elegant retreats. Soon, she was working with business owners, diplomats, and wealthy families who wanted her touch of understated sophistication. Maya's style was unique. She mixed modern simplicity with warm tones that reflected her Filipino roots. Clients adored how her designs felt both grand and personal, as if each space carried a story only they could tell. By her second year in Dubai, she was no longer just another expatriate chasing opportunity. She had become one of the most talked-about young interior designers in the city. Invitations to elite events and social gatherings began to arrive, though she kept her focus on her craft. Success filled her with quiet pride, yet there was always a sense of distance between her and the glittering world of wealth she worked within. For Maya, it was about art, not power. She had no idea that her rising reputation was about to draw the attention of someone whose interest would go far beyond design. Maya's growing reputation eventually brought her into the orbit of one of Dubai's most influential figures, Sheikh Omar Al-Mansoor. He was a man who seemed to embody wealth itself. His name carried weight in business circles, his photograph appeared in glossy magazines, and his sprawling real estate empire stretched across the city. When his representatives contacted Maya to discuss a potential project, she assumed it was another luxury apartment or office space. It wasn't until she was escorted through the guarded gates of his private villa that she realized the scale of what she had been invited to do. The villa was unlike anything she had seen before, even in Dubai. Massive courtyards opened into halls adorned with rare marble, while fountains trickled under golden chandeliers. Yet, despite the grandeur, Omar wanted more. He explained through his assistants that he was searching for a personal designer who could transform his estate into something timeless, a masterpiece that reflected both modern elegance and traditional Arab heritage. Maya's portfolio had impressed him, but he wanted to see how she could handle a project of this magnitude. For Maya, the opportunity was nothing short of life-changing. The villa project promised not only financial reward, but also visibility on a scale she had never imagined. Working for someone of Omar's stature meant her name would circulate among the city's most powerful families and investors. She felt both excited and cautious, aware that entering the world of the ultra-elite came with its own set of risks. Still, she accepted the challenge, determined to prove that her creativity could shine even in the shadow of extreme wealth. What she didn't know was that this single decision would alter the course of her life forever. Maya began working on the villa almost immediately, immersing herself in every detail of the massive project. She spent long days walking through the echoing halls, taking careful notes on the proportions of the rooms, the flow of light, and the textures of the existing materials. Omar's team provided her with endless resources, catalogs of rare furniture, connections to international suppliers, and access to artisans who could craft custom pieces. For Maya, it was like stepping into a dream where every idea could be brought to life without concern for cost. She envisioned a design that blended sleek contemporary lines with touches of warmth and tradition, creating spaces that felt both majestic and welcoming. Weeks turned into months, and the villa began to transform under her guidance. Vast empty rooms were filled with imported Italian marble, hand-woven Persian rugs, and carefully chosen artworks from around the world. She introduced soft lighting that shifted with the time of day, giving each space its own unique atmosphere. Omar visited often to review her progress, and each time he seemed more impressed. He praised her ability to see beauty where others saw only walls and windows. His admiration came with a constant request that she join him for private dinners after work, gatherings where he entertained wealthy associates and foreign dignitaries. At first, Maya saw these invitations as a chance to network, to meet people who might open doors for future projects. The dinners were lavish, filled with extravagant dishes and conversations about art, travel, and business. But behind the glitter, there was something that made her uneasy. Omar's attention lingered on her more than it did on the luxurious surroundings, and though she tried to ignore it, she could sense that his interest in her was moving beyond professional respect. The change was subtle at first, almost easy to dismiss. A bouquet of rare orchids arrived at Maya's apartment one morning, delivered with no note, but carrying Omar's familiar crest on the card. Soon after, a designer handbag appeared at her office reception desk, far too expensive to be a casual gift. Maya felt uncomfortable, but tried to convince herself that this was simply how the wealthy expressed gratitude. Yet, as the days passed, the gifts grew larger and more personal. Diamond earrings, a silk gown in her exact size, and even keys to a luxury car she had never requested. The generosity felt less like appreciation and more like a claim being staked. What unsettled her even more was the way Omar began inserting himself into her routine. On several occasions, he appeared unannounced at the villa site, not to inspect progress, but to watch her work. Sometimes he would arrive at her office without warning, waiting in the lobby until she agreed to see him. His compliments, once about her talent, began to focus on her appearance, her voice, her presence in the room. The line between client and designer was dissolving, and Maya felt it slipping out of her control. She tried to keep her responses polite but distant, hoping that maintaining professionalism would send the message she wasn't interested. Yet the more she stepped back, the more persistent Omar became. Friends began noticing her stress, remarking on her distracted demeanor and lack of sleep. To the outside world, she was still the rising star of Dubai's design scene, but privately, she was beginning to feel cornered. What had started as a career-defining opportunity was slowly transforming into something far more troubling, and Maya could sense that ignoring it would no longer be enough. Maya decided to create distance, keeping conversations with Omar short and limiting her visits to the villa strictly to work hours. But the more she pulled away, the more invasive his presence became. One evening, she returned to her car after a late meeting only to find all 4 tires slashed. A folded note lay under the wiper, scrawled with a message that chilled her. Be grateful for those who protect you. It was the first time she realized that her safety might truly be in danger. Fear began to creep into the corners of her life, turning everyday routines into moments of tension. Soon after, anonymous text messages started arriving on her phone. They were brief but unsettling, reminding her of places she had been that day or warning her not to disrespect generosity. At first, she wondered if she was imagining the connection, but the timing was too precise to be coincidence. Maya became hyper-aware of her surroundings, glancing over her shoulder in parking lots and checking the locks on her apartment doors multiple times each night. Even in her workplace, the pressure followed her. Packages arrived without explanation, expensive watches and jewelry boxed in velvet, each with no sender but an obvious origin. She stopped opening them, leaving them stacked untouched in a corner. What had once been a project of pride was now a prison of anxiety. The thought of confronting Omar terrified her, yet ignoring him seemed just as dangerous. Friends advised her to leave the project altogether, but Maya worried about the consequences of defiance. She was caught in a web of control, every move shadowed by an unseen threat, and she feared the cost of saying no was rising with every passing day. Maya could no longer dismiss her fears as paranoia. Determined to understand what she was truly dealing with, she began quietly asking questions about Omar's past. Through casual conversations with contractors and staff who had worked in his circles, she pieced together fragments of a troubling story. Many described him as charming and generous in public, but behind closed doors, he was known for a temper that few dared to challenge. There were whispers of former assistants who had left suddenly, disappearing without explanation, and business partners who had broken ties under mysterious circumstances. None of it appeared in the news, but the silence around his name seemed more frightening than any published scandal. Digging deeper, Maya turned to online forums and expat communities, hoping to find confirmation. There she came across vague warnings from people who claimed to have worked for wealthy elites in the city. One post described a powerful man whose advances had led to ruined careers and forced departures. The details were vague but eerily similar to her own situation. Another mentioned bribes and connections with local officials, suggesting that his influence reached far beyond business and into the systems meant to protect people. The more she learned, the heavier the dread became. It was clear that Omar's power was not just financial. It was the kind that silenced opposition and erased problems. Maya realized that if she chose to resist him openly, she might not have the protection she needed. What unsettled her most was the thought that others before her may have tried and failed. She understood then that she was not simply dealing with an overbearing client. She was entangled in the life of a man who had much to hide and much more to lose. Maya finally decided she could no longer endure the situation. The tension of living under Omar's shadow had grown unbearable, and the villa project, once her greatest achievement, now felt like a chain pulling her deeper into danger. With careful consideration, she drafted a formal message to his representatives, explaining that she was withdrawing from the work for personal reasons. She expected backlash, but she hoped ending the professional relationship would sever the connection. Instead, her decision seemed to ignite something far darker. Almost immediately, the atmosphere around her shifted. Neighbors mentioned seeing a sleek black car parked near her building late at night, its tinted windows concealing whoever sat inside. Friends who visited noticed the same vehicle following them at a distance when they left. At first, Maya tried to convince herself it was coincidence, but the consistency of its presence left little room for doubt. She felt watched everywhere she went, at the grocery store, at her office, even when she tried to take a quiet walk in the park. Her stress began to show. She jumped at sudden noises, struggled to sleep, and kept her phone within reach at all times. The sense of being hunted gnawed at her daily. One evening, her building's security guard mentioned that a man had asked about her apartment number but refused to give his name. Another time, she returned home to find her front door slightly ajar, though nothing inside appeared stolen. It was as if someone wanted her to know they could reach her whenever they chose. Maya realized that leaving the project hadn't freed her. If anything, it had triggered Omar's obsession into a dangerous new stage where rejection was something he simply would not accept. The night Maya disappeared began like any other. She had a major design presentation scheduled the following morning for a new client, one she had been eager to impress as a fresh start after the turmoil of recent months. Friends recalled speaking with her that afternoon. She sounded tired but optimistic, mentioning how she looked forward to moving on with her life. But when the day of the presentation arrived, she never showed. Calls went unanswered, and messages were left on read without replies. By evening, concern grew into panic. Her colleagues went to her apartment, only to find the door locked from the outside. Inside, the scene was unsettling. Her phone lay on the kitchen counter, charging as though she had left it there only for a moment. A half-packed portfolio of sketches sat on the table, and a cup of coffee had gone cold nearby. There were no signs of forced entry, but the air felt heavy, as if someone had left in a hurry. Friends immediately reported her missing, knowing Maya was far too responsible to vanish without a word. Rumors quickly spread in the design community, carried on whispers of fear and suspicion. Many recalled her uneasy relationship with Omar, though few dared to say his name out loud. Some claimed to have seen a luxury car idling near her building late that evening, its headlights off, parked in the shadows. Others mentioned a security camera that caught a blurred image of a figure escorting a woman into the vehicle. Nothing was confirmed, but the timeline pointed to one conclusion: Maya hadn't left willingly. The disappearance shocked those who admired her, and the silence that followed deepened the sense that something terrible had happened behind the walls of wealth and power. The investigation into Maya's disappearance quickly became one of the most talked-about cases in Dubai. Authorities, pressured by her friends, colleagues, and even international media, began piecing together her final hours. Security camera footage showed Omar's black car driving near her apartment complex late that evening, circling the block more than once. Witnesses later confirmed seeing the same vehicle idling near the entrance at the time Maya was last known to be home. Although circumstantial, The evidence placed him uncomfortably close to the scene. Police searched her apartment but found no clear trace of a struggle, only the eerie sense of interruption. Forensics teams collected fingerprints and analyzed her belongings, yet the strongest lead came from outside her home. Tire tracks discovered in a quiet desert area near Omar's private estate matched those from his luxury vehicle. This detail pushed suspicion toward him, though his influence made the investigation unusually delicate. Few dared to confront someone of his standing without undeniable proof. Behind the villa's heavily guarded gates, investigators pressed harder. What they uncovered disturbed even the most seasoned officers. Hidden in storage rooms were personal items that could be traced back to Maya. Small things like a sketchbook with her initials, fragments of fabric from one of her design samples, and a necklace her family confirmed as hers. These discoveries shifted the case from missing person to likely abduction. Despite his wealth and connections, Omar's carefully maintained image began to crack under scrutiny. The whispers that Maya had uncovered about his past now seemed more credible than ever. For the first time, the shield of untouchable privilege appeared vulnerable, and the possibility of exposing his secrets grew stronger with each piece of evidence brought to light. As the investigation gained momentum, Omar's carefully constructed facade of respectability began to unravel. For weeks, he denied any involvement in Maya's disappearance, insisting that their relationship had been strictly professional. Yet the evidence was mounting in ways he could no longer dismiss. Under growing public pressure, authorities searched deeper into the sealed chambers of his villa, areas even close associates claimed never to have entered. What they found erased any lingering doubt about his guilt. Inside a hidden room behind reinforced doors, investigators discovered Maya's personal sketches scattered on the floor, some crumpled and others torn. Several pages bore stains that suggested a violent struggle had taken place. Among the belongings were items unmistakably hers, pieces of jewelry, a scarf she often wore, and the leather portfolio she carried to every project. The discovery painted a grim picture. Maya had been brought there against her will, her final days hidden within the walls of wealth that had once symbolized her greatest opportunity. Omar was arrested and charged, though his influence meant the legal process dragged on, filled with attempts to delay and discredit. Still, the weight of evidence was undeniable, and the elite circles he once dazzled began to distance themselves. The story sent shockwaves through Dubai and beyond, exposing how unchecked power could mask predatory obsession. For Maya's friends and family, the truth brought heartbreak but also clarity. She had not vanished without reason. She had been silenced by the very man who claimed to admire her talent. In the end, Maya's story became a cautionary tale, a reminder that ambition and trust can be twisted into danger when power falls into the hands of those who believe they are untouchable. Her legacy as an artist endured, but her fate revealed the darkest side of desire.